Mankind is undergoing an apocalypse. An apocalypse that began long before AI was even invented. One that is so much more and so much more profound than the current discussion on AI taking our jobs or even AI taking over the world, Terminator style. Because what we are facing right now represents more than anything else a crisis of meaning. One that might lead to our eventual downfall or lead to a rebirth of everything that was and is human. That is what we're going to talk about today. The end, the apocalypse, as it were. The choice faced by every single individual today, consisting of the same two options that has faced every single individual who has ever lived. A choice that has become more difficult as the arena has become more complex, more noisy, more deceitful. Namely, for the individual whether to choose oneself or not. Do we choose to sit down, figure out what is meaningful to us and pursue it? Ridding ourselves of the noise, of all of those things and people around us which essentially undermine our happiness. Do we pursue meaning through thinking and acting? Do we embrace that which we were constructed to do? Or do we take everything that is human, everything that is essential to us, and leave it at the mercy of someone, or in this case, something else? The rise of AI is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end. But it represents the latest few steps taken by humanity on a dark path towards self-obliteration on more than one level. What happens when the mind is left behind? When we as individuals begin to outsource everything from cognition, reasoning, thinking, problem solving to the pursuit of happiness itself. And is there a way out? A way out of the gnawing sensation that many young people, university graduates, young parents, people who have recently entered the job market, etc., that gnawing sensation that so many of us feel in our stomachs when we think about AI and how it will affect us, our lives, our future happiness. So grab a coffee, sit down, turn off all of your other digital devices. Let's, as always, turn down the pace a bit and talk about this. Now, mankind is an incredible species. Our evolutionary advantage is our minds, our capacity for reason, for abstraction, for creativity, allowing us to see past the horizon, to think in terms of systems, to abstract away from ourselves and the satisfaction of our own immediate desires, and understand the concept of long-term self-interest, as well as our awareness of our own mortality, which drives us to think deeply about our own choices and actions, and motivates us to seek out ideas of good and evil. But it is also that same mind, that same drive to solve problems, to produce, build, and expand. That same drive which to some extent has led to the flourishing of mankind as a species, which like a virus, like a cancer cell, keeps on going and keeps driving us to build and expand even when we reach the point where it undermines our values, where it undermines meaning itself, to the point where it might threaten our own survival as individuals and in a way as a species as well. Now, why would this be the case? Let's first look briefly at what AI is, what it was supposed to do, and what it is actually doing. Of course, over the span of just a few years, artificial intelligence has gone from a niche curiosity used by researchers and tech enthusiasts to a technology capable of writing reports, generating software, creating art, producing videos, conducting research, replacing administrative tasks, and increasingly performing work that millions of people once believed could only be done by humans. All with one concrete purpose: to increase productivity. That is, increase the output that comes out of a certain level of input across the board. And perhaps this is the first real thing to pay attention to, because almost every major technological revolution of the modern age has been sold to us through the language of convenience, efficiency, and productivity. Save time, reduce effort, remove friction. Now, the interesting question here is, of course, what happens when friction itself was a part of the point to begin with? In 2022, most people had never touched an advanced AI system. Today, hundreds of millions of people use AI tools every single day. Entire industries are being reorganized around them. Companies are restructuring. Jobs are either changing or disappearing entirely. Expectations are shifting across the board. And of course, every few months, a new generation of AI arrives, which makes the older ones seem primitive in comparison. Now, of course, some people are embracing AI as the savior of mankind. With machines doing everything for us, capitalism has finally done its job, right? It's finally time for all of us to just lay back, relax, enjoy life, and that UBI check ticking in every month, of course. Others are revolting against it. There are movements of people, and an ever-growing number out of Gen X and Gen Z, who are choosing to abandon technology and AI. Something which is exemplified to some degree by the viral moments of recent weeks, where university students boo speakers who talk about and praise AI. Now, whether these university students are doing this simply because they're afraid of not getting a job after graduation, or because of deeper philosophical reflections, remain, I guess, to be seen. Because the real fundamental problem here is not labor market disruptions, as we shall see in a moment. And now, of course, technological innovation is not in itself a bad thing. It is the very reason why the very lowest of social classes in certain Western nations today enjoy higher living standards than nobility in medieval times. That is not the point of this video, to argue that technological innovation is categorically bad. The point is that for every disruption, for every piece of technology, for each piece of progress, there might come a time when something is no longer really serving us in our pursuit of the things that are truly meaningful to us. For instance, the moment where we begin to take everything that is giving us purpose as human beings and just outsourcing it to something else. Because for every piece of innovation, for every disruption, there is always the temptation to just allow someone or something else to do this or that thing for us. To take some of that burden off of our own shoulders and place it somewhere else just for a time. And to a certain extent, that does make sense. We might enjoy some manual labor, but there comes a time when we would prefer excavators to dig our holes for us rather than have to do it ourselves. There comes a time when calculations reach a certain level of complexity, and we are happy to have machines do them for us, or at least have machines double check our own calculations to make sure they're correct, etc., etc. But for every such innovation, no matter how much we gain from it, it carries with it certain costs. And this has been the case throughout the entirety of human history. From the Egyptian king Thamos, who warned that the written language would lead to the deterioration of the human capacity for memorizing detail, the modern day individual, who, after having been brought up for less than a generation with GPS, now cannot seem to find our way on our own anywhere anymore. And now we live in a world where the term brain rot has become one of the defining cultural terms of an entire generation. Researchers studying short-form content consumption have found associations between excessive consumption of short videos and reduced executive control, weaker attention regulation, and lower self-control. Multiple studies now suggest that endless streams of rapidly changing content condition the brain toward constant novelty seeking rather than sustained concentration. And we can wonder how anybody could truly be surprised about those results. In one analysis, average sustained attention on a single screen task reportedly fell from around 150 seconds in the early 2000s to less than 50 seconds 2 decades later. And of course, to many of the critics of modern-day capitalism, who argue that while industrialization and innovation might indeed have increased living standards, it has also led to all of us being alienated from our own work, from our own lives. Something which any person who has ever solved a problem using their own mind or built something using their own hands can surely recognize. And now, here we are, with the invention of AI, a technology which promises to help us solve all of our problems, big and small. All we have to do is leave our minds behind. Now, there is an important distinction to be made, I think. AI does not really make us better at solving our problems to the same extent as a pocket calculator does not make you better at calculating. No, AI doesn't help us solve our problems. It solves our problems for us. And that's an important distinction. In fact, one of the largest studies yet conducted on AI and critical thinking, published by researchers from Microsoft in 2025, found that the more confidence workers placed in AI systems, the less likely they were to critically engage with the outputs themselves. Another result, which is pretty obvious, again, I think. The researchers repeatedly observed what psychologists call cognitive offloading, the transfer of mental effort away from the human mind and onto external systems. In other words, the more people trusted the machines, the less they felt like they needed to think and the less they actually engaged in thinking. And what happens to any of our muscles when we stop exercising them? What would happen to your body if you, like in the Pixar movie WALL-E, for instance, which comes to mind here, decided to just let machines do everything physical for you, all the way down to the act of walking itself? The same is, of course, the case for the mind. The human mind was built for thinking, for solving problems, for identifying a goal somewhere out there, something that would make our lives better, and then pursuing it. Not expanding for the sake of expanding, as we also touched upon in my last video, but looking at our own lives and saying, that thing over there, that has meaning to me. How do I make that happen? How do I build that house? Okay, I need these and those materials, these and those types of wood. How do I get that? Well, I need to create these or these types of tools. Well, then let's get that built. I want to catch this animal. Okay, how do I build a weapon for doing that? How do I build a better trap for catching animals, etc.? Problem solving has been with us for as long as we have existed as a species. And though it might again pose as a great temptation, and though it might even to some extent feel somewhat good in the short run to just allow a machine to do all of the thinking for us, doing it amounts to a Faustian bargain. It means almost literally selling our souls for the immediate satisfaction of relaxation for a moment. Because as we become accustomed to using AI and technology in general, many of us do not limit its usage to assist us in our 9-to-5 jobs. Instead, we bring it with us home. And over time, little by little, as we come across things, problems, choices which should have meant us sitting down for a moment with a cup of coffee, thinking, reflecting, philosophizing, we ask the AI instead to think for us, to choose for us. What should I study? What career should I pursue? How do I raise my children? What should I believe? What does this feeling mean? Who am I? And we don't even wait around while the AI does the thinking for us. Meanwhile, we switch over to another tab, continue watching the latest episode of that Netflix series that we are currently binge watching, and then return later once the AI is done making our life choices for us. And as in Adam Sandler's classic, slightly dark comedy movie Click, life, that is all of the things that a meaningful existence truly consists of just passes us by. We need purpose to be happy. And a feeling of purpose arises when we as individuals pursue the things that hold meaning to us. That means that we pursue knowledge, personal development, that we pursue jobs that seem purposeful to us. It means that we pursue social relationships that seem purposeful, again, to us. But all of these things require energy, they require effort. It requires a lot of thought to figure out what is meaningful to us. And it requires a lot of thought and a lot of energy to actually achieve those values. And suddenly it seems like those things have become more cheap, right? Pornography is one example of why this trend dates back to way before the rise of AI. The same with online dating, and before that, things like speed dating. All things ultimately designed to make it appear cheaper and easier to achieve meaning. Only pursuing values will never really become cheaper than it was 200 or even 2000 years ago. Because the things that really matter are never cheap. They require our life. And that is why they matter. And now AI, of course, proceeds to do the same thing. Once again, we are being offered a Faustian bargain. And this is not just some distant sci-fi scenario. Surveys in Britain have already found that roughly 1/3 of citizens have used AI systems for emotional support, companionship, or social interaction. Entire industries of AI companions have emerged, where people increasingly speak to artificial personalities about loneliness, relationships, anxiety, depression, and life decisions. Despite being more connected than ever before, so many of us are lonely. A problem which I think justifies an entire video on its own, though. So many of us are anxious of our own mortality, which leads us to be scared of the consequences of making our own choices, which makes us scared of acting and thinking in general. Why do we think that so many of us, why more and more people today, regard their own jobs as completely purposeless? While the sheer thought of what we are doing in our own 9-to-5 jobs makes so many of us almost vomit out of boredom. Because so much of what so many of us do today has become separated from what our minds were originally designed to do. Identify real problems, real targets, real goals, and then accomplish them by doing real things. And so much of what we spend our time on has become separated from what we as individuals really find meaningful. And since the roller coaster seems to be going faster and faster, while the noise of society, consumerism, and all of the other beautiful aspects of modern Western society is becoming louder, we never get the space to sit down and reflect deeply on the beautiful complexity that is our own fragile lives. There is a reason why in a famous 2015 study from Britain, 37% of respondents said that they did not believe that their own jobs contributed to the world in any meaningful way. And there are, by the way, other and newer studies confirming this trend all over the world. That we live in societies riddled with tasks and jobs, which even the people performing them regard to be pointless and irrelevant. What is particularly striking is that many of the jobs people report as most meaningless are not necessarily the physically difficult jobs. Often they are administrative, bureaucratic, and managerial roles disconnected from tangible outcomes. The worker cannot see the problem being solved, cannot see the result, cannot see the human consequence of the work, and therefore cannot derive meaning from it. Should we maybe not consider whether the reason for this is that so many jobs today are completely disconnected from what we as human beings find innately meaningful? That they are instead the result of the whims of tyrants and the piles upon piles of arbitrary rules and regulation, which have led to the rise of an army of bureaucratic and administrative workers with nothing better to do than to perform tasks which should never have existed to begin with, using up that precious time and life energy which could have been so much better spent if allocated on things that actually improved their own lives or the lives of those around them. The apocalypse which we are living through is one that has been decades, if not centuries, underway. And we must consider whether the real crisis facing us is really a matter of labor market disruptions, educational disruptions, intellectual property rights, or even the risk of AI taking over the world Terminator style and killing us all. But rather that what we as individuals, as a species, is facing right now is a deep crisis of meaning. Living in a society which already before the arrival of AI did so much to confuse us, to lure us away from our pursuit of our own meaning, by filling our heads with doubt in ourselves, materialist and consumerist illusions of need, by connecting our self-confidence to the paradigm of productivity, something which I will cover in a future video as well, so that we, instead of just sitting down and really considering what makes sense for us, what gives our lives value, get to run around like hamsters in our own little wheels, like rats following the Pied Piper's tune. In this regard, AI is merely the latest branch on the tree that is alienation from ourselves. Let's forget ourselves even more. Let's outsource everything, and I mean everything, until there is nothing left. Until even the act of choosing the names for our own children, of reading books, of writing literature, poetry, YouTube video manuscripts, studying and learning, thinking, figuring out what our own values are and how to achieve them, is all taken care of somewhere else. All of which so that we may sit back, enjoy the ride, and do what? Well, I guess we'll, yeah, that's right. You will sit back, you will enjoy the ride, you will relax until the moment where you begin to figure out what happens when you rid yourself and your life from meaning entirely. When we take everything that we were built to do, when we take that muscle that is the mind and stop training it, when we decide to not practice thinking, reasoning, when we stop engaging in the art of making choices for ourselves and taking responsibility. In other words, when we leave the mind behind. Because that is perhaps the deepest danger facing us today, and one that has been building up for a long time, from long before AI really stepped into the picture. Not that the machine becomes human-like and begins to take over the world, but that we as humans accept to bargain away our own will and capacity to run our own lives, and instead, for the sake of gaining just a little bit of short-term ease and satisfaction, become passive, dependent, comfortable in not living, unable to tolerate uncertainty, effort, reflection, boredom, and responsibility without immediately having to reach out for an external system to remove the discomfort, unable to think, to reflect, to choose, to act. All of the key components of a life spent pursuing values and meaning. All aspects of a life that will not be regretted in the end. The apocalypse that we are facing might not be the destruction of humanity by artificial intelligence, but rather our destruction of ourselves, with AI as our primary tool of doing so, through the gradual abandonment of the very capacities that made us human in the first place. But lastly, what can we do about it? What can we as individuals do when the roller coaster seems to be going faster and faster and there seems no way off of it? Well, jump. We have to get off the roller coaster. We have to learn to stand still. And we have to engage our own minds and our own bodies in the living of our own lives. As I said in the beginning of this video, all of this can lead in two different directions. One is the downfall of us as individuals into a darkness of complete meaninglessness. A world consisting of easy but purposeless lives. And the other is the rebirth of humanity. If we teach ourselves silence, to slow down, if we allow ourselves the time, the energy that it requires to look at ourselves, our own lives, and identify piece for piece what holds meaning to us, to me, subjectively, as an individual, and then figure out, all right, how do I achieve these things? Myself, using my own body, using my own mind, engaging with reality, with my surroundings, connecting with human beings because those human beings are meaningful to me, learning this skill because this specific skill is again meaningful to me, choosing this work or choosing to perform these tasks because they are purposeful to me, and not accept the surrendering of our hearts, minds, and souls to neither dictators nor machines. Then there is a chance that we might develop from a state of being lost, which has worsened over the course of decades, if not centuries, to a state of being found by ourselves, that is, to a state of living.